Um, yeah, so I've always sort of aspired to get to a 911, but circumstances always said, "Oh, I need to just drive this for a little bit, and then I need a car for this, and then, it's the story that goes on and on and on." It's funny, I wouldn't say like we were a car family, but we would get the cousins' reclaimed cars. We would get my grandma's old cars. So we had like sleeper cars. So we would get like a 79 Malibu Classic, and it was white with a blue Landau top. And my dad put a Chevy 350 into it, instead of the V6, and then it was like a 12-second quarter-mile car all of a sudden. But it looked like my grandma's car still. So there's always something kind of funny and clever about it. We had a larger family, so it was like we never had like the awesome cars, but there was always something awesome about each one. We had a old riding lawnmower that my dad brought home one day at the garage sale, or found it and just let my three brothers and I just sort of mess around with it. So my oldest brother was, older and knew more, so he re-pulleyed it, and this thing went like 20 miles an hour all of a sudden, and I was customizing the shell and painting it, but just because it was fun. It wasn't something like I was a customizer. Kind of my first good memories of a car that I could actually get in and move around was an RX-7 79. A 914 Porsche was really close to that. An early Civic Bubble, I call it the Bubble Back, was close to that too. But I had a few cars before I could drive. So it's funny, my dad took me out to teach me how to drive a stick. Oh, you're almost 16, let's teach you how to drive. So into this dirt parking lot, I get in the car and, "Oh, okay, how do you do this?" Kind of just pretending to not know how to drive. And then I just whipped a full donut in this dirt parking lot, into second, into third, still spinning. He's like, "Just take me home." Going back, the thing that changed my life 100%, if I'm thinking about one moment, it was a pop-up Tron book that I still have it. And your first page, it's like, what is this? Second page, it's like, this is mind-blowing. So I know that book in and out. It's kind of one of the things that kind of led me into where I am today. So I always had like an appreciation for like form, power, nuances of design and language. And I was always drawing like the wedge-shaped cars from the 80s. And they still sort of fascinate me, and I sort of am drawn to those still, the wedge supercars. I went to a community college and sculpture class. I remember I had a 73 Volvo 164 four-door, and I went to the junkyard. I bought a front end of a Nash Metropolitan, and they're like, "Well, how are you gonna get this home?" I'm like, "Just put it on the roof of the car, and I had a roof rack because I had surfboards and stuff like that. And so they forklifted this thing up and just sat it on. They're like, "Well, have a good day," So I strapped it on, and so I had a car in a car. I had to buy the whole car, and they flipped it on top of my car upside down because I needed the front end. So it didn't have axles and stuff, but it was the whole chassis. So I strapped it down on top of my Volvo and then drove, 10, 15 miles back to school. And then, 5 or 6 of us just sort of dumped it off the side of the car. We like to look at things that are familiar and kind of know instantly what they are, but I like to play with that familiarity and like twist a little bit. It's like, I'm pretty sure that I can get on that and ride. It reminds me of a motorcycle, but I'm not sure what to do with it. And I like those activators in your mind that sort of heightens your creativity and makes you wonder about something. Yeah, when you shift the whole pattern, the whole game, that's what I'm interested in doing. I think in my case, for better or for worse, I can ignore everything I know about it, and then I start the project. So once I sort of know everything about it, then I erase all that and then start the project. And I think that's where the creativity comes in. I've always kind of kept the automotive side kind of sacred in my design firm. I tried to keep like my design firm this and then my passion sort of outside of that. And then a few years into my business, I'm like, I wanted to build a car. I want to see how hard it is. I want to really know about the car, the automobile. And so I decided to just make one from scratch, like full on ground up. And it's really hard. So that car was the reboot buggy. It turned into this sort of a monstrous beast. Well, it's like, the horse it's just a horse. It's an animal in the wild, right? And then we've pulled it in and we sit on it, we make a saddle. Like, it's not designed for us to move it around. I put the same criteria of that first car as a horse. It's like, it's not going to be designed for us. What does the car want for itself to go anywhere, go over anything, and do what it needs to be as a car? And then at the 11th hour, I said, okay, I got to get 2 people in here. And I like playing in the extreme this or extreme that. If you're in the middle, it's boring, and you end up with 4-door, insert car brand company name here, the who cares model, And we have a bunch of those. It's not interesting to me. I guess it wasn't a dream, I could say, but it is fun to look back and say or see that really influenced me growing up. From a design perspective too, I owe a lot of credit to this car, the 911 particularly, and Porsche for like just the design sense. Fascination with 911s, it's everybody's fascination, I suppose, but it does grab you pretty early. I was like flipping and turning cars to get to a 911. I've always loved the shape of a 911, and the neighbor might have one, or you'd see one once in a while. It's just like, oh, I can't handle this thing, and to get to drive one or sit in one, it's like you're just hooked. There's so many things about it that are magical and perfect. I hate to use the word perfect, but they really are like it's a driving machine that's dialed in just right from lots of different angles. Life with Porsche, circumstances allowed me to buy 2 unfinished Project 914 cars. One was on a rotisserie, so I got a car and a box full of parts. I think I had like $600 saved, and my dad pitched in the other half, to buy these 2. One was a real dilapidated parts car, but so I spent the next year and a half or so putting this together, and it's a pretty sweet education to take one apart and then put it back together. You learn a little bit about where things go. So, wiper motors and windows and all that stuff. So that was really cool. Years later, I picked up another 63 T5 twin grill, kind of on a whim. Craigslist just popped up. I ran down there and picked it up. And then, during that time, I was driving a 99 996 Daily Driver C4, which is an awesome car, snow tires, like it's so much fun, manual. And I had driven a 991, 911, and I'm like, okay, I gotta figure this out. So I sold my 996 and then looked for the right 991. It's simple, it's bare bones, it's down to the basics, but it's still bonkers at the same time. Like, it's got that sleeper mentality a little bit that I kind of grew up with. And this is not a sleeper by any means, but it's not as showy as a lot of exotics in the same category. It's just the view is perfect. The A-pillar is basically invisible. There's a sport button, an exhaust button. Like there's just a couple things in there that's just like, you're driving around, you're like, boop, you know, and you're having a bunch of fun. But then you turn that off and you're getting 28 miles per gallon. So at any moment, like any on-ramp is like a launch pad into outer space. You know, it's like these little moments in your day that you can just lay into it all the way up through the R's, and then shift manually. These also drip fuel into the exhaust to give you a gurgle on the downshift. It's the best thing ever because it's so ridiculous. It's bad for everything, but it's so good for your soul. It's like wop, 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 wop. You know, it's like, it's perfect. And then just looking at different features of it, it's like, oh, that's so, that line, like somebody must have just fretted, they literally fretted years over this line, like half centuries over this particular line. And I find that really cool. It's a slow evolution of an iconic shape. I like the timelessness too. I try to design that doesn't really have a timestamp on it. Not really sure when it was made. I try not to follow trends particularly quickly. To kind of learn maybe what's coming, or like, so that you don't really know when it was made. In this car especially, if you're not a complete nerd about these, you wouldn't know 1 year to the next. It's just a Porsche, you know, and maybe specifically a 911, but it's generally just a Porsche.
Put it in sport mode!